Hello, welcome to Walk in the Park. My name is Tony Ingram, and this is our episode 129, recorded on February 10th, 2016. You can see all of my shows at my video blog at walkinthepark.tv. This show is on Pegasus Public Access in Ithaca, New York. If you go to the blog, you can go up to the tab that says The TV Show, and you can get the full schedule of the cable casts. And it is, of course, online. So this is February, of course. This time last year was a lot colder than it is this year. So I'm going to show you this aerial photograph of Ithaca on the bottom and Cayuga Lake snaking to the north. This was actually early March, I think about March 2nd or so, taken by East Hill Flying Club in Ithaca, showing that most of Cayuga Lake was frozen at that time, and the lake almost completely froze over for the first time since 1979. So nothing like that this year, but this is what it looked like a little over a year. Well, yeah, I guess this was probably early March as well. This is up at Teganic Falls State Park, completely frozen over from one side of the lake to the other. Okay, but we're not going to think about that too much because we do have some cold weather coming in here probably by the time you're watching this. It's getting colder and we have some Arctic air coming down, but hopefully that won't last too long. So the last couple of weeks we've been having episodes about, well, there've been about a talk by the Friends of Robert H. Treman State Park at TremanParkFriends.org is their website. And the talk was by Professor Shireen Bauer at Cornell, called Digging in the Big and Little Apple, Archaeology in New York City and in Ithaca. Dr. Bauer was the first city archaeologist for New York, and then she came to Cornell and she continued her archaeological work here locally. So she did a lot of work in New York here. The first episode of this is part 3 we're going to do today, was about, well, this is an early building that was in New York, in Dutch New York, the Dutch government building, Stadhuis, or house or whatever. And they did some digging there, and also a tavern next door. They found over 200,000 objects there, surprised everybody, so that's when they decided they better have a professional archaeologist on staff. And then later, they dug up, these were all in response to development projects actually that were going on, so the archaeology work was done. And they discovered a ship that was buried in land that had been created on the edges of New York in lower Manhattan, where it had once been shallow water back in the 1600s and 1700s. They filled it in and created dry land with it, and one of the things they did was bury a ship there. They sunk a ship. I guess it was an old ship they didn't want, and they filled that up with garbage and so forth. In the next episode, last week, in the work that was going to be done on City Hall in New York, they looked at what remained of the New York City 18th century almshouse, the first homeless shelter in New York, and that was a real interesting story and things they discovered. And also went to the African burial ground, which another area that a federal building was going up, and then they found all these graves, and people of color were buried there. Over 400, almost 500 graves were found there. So it became a National Park Service site. It's now the African Burial Ground National Monument, operated by the National Park Service. Very small national park. So we're going to continue the story now in Ithaca, and Dr. Bauer, when she came here to Cornell several years later, beginning in 1998 actually, she began excavation in the upper end of Robert H. Treman State Park, where there was once a hamlet, and what they call, what she calls an agricultural service hamlet that had mills and shops and so forth. And it also had a tourist hotel that she'll tell you all about. That and it was called the hamlet of Enfield Falls, and it became the core of Robert H. Treman State Park. So that's been real interesting. It's been going on since then, and it has. This project has been assisted by the Friends of Robert H. Treman State Park, and we'll talk a little bit more about them later. So let's go to part 3, Digging in the Big and Little Apple, Archaeology in New York City and in Ithaca.
And at Robert Treman State Park, one of my most favorite places, and certainly my most favorite state park. And all of you have probably been out there looking at the beautiful gorges and waterfalls. In the 19th century, there was this thriving village in the upper park, and we excavated actually most of these buildings, including the 19th century hotel and resort. And we think of tourism at any of our state parks starting in the 1920s, when New York starts building up a state park system. But out here in 1853, a woman decides to start creating a tourist interest and a tourist industry coming from Ithaca out to Enfield Falls to see the beautiful waterfalls and gorges. The only buildings that survive today, as Bob said, is the mill, and this is the miller's house. The mill was owned by Robert Treman's great uncle. This was his great uncle's home. And when Robert Treman bought up this whole community in between 1916 and 1920, his only stipulation when he gave all this property to the state was that his great uncle's mill and his great uncle's home had to be preserved. Everything else could be torn down, and over time it was. But luckily, when they tore things down, they just sort of leveled the property. So for us, the Cornell archaeologists, that what we found just about 6 inches, or at the most a foot below grade, are the foundations of the buildings, their backyards where they were throwing out garbage. So, and in some cases, right in their basement or the crawl space underneath their first floor, we found when the building got demolished, they were just pushing everything in. So we've gotten a lot of material to talk about the people who live there. And here are happy students finding, in this case, they're finding the remains of one of the foundations. Here they're lifting up the remains of a bed frame that they just found. And given its archaeology, what we're finding are not whole objects, but broken things. Connected with the hotel, not surprisingly, in their garbage dump, and archaeologists always talk about that as a midden, because that sounds much better than saying garbage dump. We found broken wine bottles, we're not surprised, broken whiskey bottles, clay smoking pipes. This one we glued together so it looks like it's whole, but it was definitely broken. One of my favorite, this was actually a whole plate, and it was what was called an ABC plate. And the ABC plate was supposed to be cereal for young children. And they made them in metal and they made them in ceramics. So the child could be eating their Cheerios in the morning or oatmeal or whatever and learning their ABCs. And this came, the hotel managers in the 1880s, the Teeter family, had 2 young daughters, and we found parts of the daughter's tea set that broke and was thrown out into the middle. And of course, we find lots of broken plates. If you see this, there is a lot. The students were very active in piecing together all the artifacts to create the whole plates, because we're basically finding, like those little artifacts I showed you with the almshouse, that's what we're finding. And then in my laboratory class, the students get to try to reconstruct the material. But because of our involvement the whole time with the Friends of Robert Treman State Park, every fall we have open house days, heritage days at the park. And you might recognize, if you're from Kendall, these 2 people, the esteemed president here of your residents associations. So here's Pauline and Bruce. And some of you may notice the man doing the filming in the back, Tony Ingram. actually taking pictures on one of these heritage days. So the Friends are very active working with us, with the park, to present a lot of public programming, just like the one we're doing today. And one of the thoughts was, how can we make what we're finding more visible to the public? So when we finish excavating a building, we've used money raised by the Friends to buy granite pavers that we've got, they've written grants, we've gotten the money, and we put the granite pavers in just over where the real footprint of the building is. We rebury the original footprint. And then this is what these footprints look like. And we have, afterwards, when you have coffee and dessert, we have brochures. We have a whole walking tour brochure that take you around to show you all of these footprints and give you more of a sense of what this village looked like. When we excavated the hotel, again, we're looking at the demolished buildings. We had no pictures of the hotel, but this is a building, this is a hotel at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, and one of the other archaeologists that the Friends know, Brand Venables, and I went out and we measured the exact footprint of this hotel, and it's the same footprint and dimensions as our hotel, Mrs. Wickham's Hotel in Enfield Falls. And the dimensions of this porch are the same dimensions we found for our building. And we know from one of the Friends, the first president of the Friends, Neil Popenzeek, interviewed some people back in the early 1880s who remember what the hotel looked like and family stories, because the hotel burns down around 1906. And they all talk about having a porch that went around 3 sides of the hotel. And sure enough, when we did the archaeology, we found the foundation for a porch around 3 sides of the hotel. And we had Michael Tomlin, who's the head of the preservation department at Cornell, come out, and he looked at the foundation, and he could tell in terms of the thickness of the foundation how many stories that foundation could hold. And it's just like you see here, what's called a 2.5-story building, because the 3rd story is really an attic space, and that the foundation for the porch actually was big enough with the support things to hold a 2-story porch. The only difference, if we were going to draw a picture of our hotel, on the narrower side of the hotel would have been where the front door was. And we know that there were 2 doors, one that went to the bar area, and then one that went to the main dining area. And this longer part of the hotel would have been facing towards the pathways that took you down to where the waterfalls are. So it would have been a pretty interesting and substantial building. And then this is the happy students standing by the footprint after they put all the granite pavers in. And then one of the professors right here from the planning department, Tom Campanella, got a drone so he could take pictures of historic buildings, and he came out and conveniently took a picture of our footprint of our hotel. So you can see, while at this angle it doesn't look very big, it's actually 50 feet long by about 25 feet wide. And then over here was a separate kitchen building, so that when you had your summer tourists, you'd cook the food in a separate building and then bring it into the hotel so that you wouldn't be heating up the hotel in the summer. And then in the cold weather, they really weren't getting tourists, but they would have, on weekends, bands come in and dances, so for the local community. And at that point, the hotel owners were living in the hotel itself, and so they were using the a kitchen just for the family and for these festive events that they had, like Valentine's Day parties, New Year's Eve parties at the hotel. But back in the lab, our students are reconstructing the artifacts, studying, trying to figure out the date of the material. And again, here's the friends. They come in every year talking to the students, and we'll listen to the students' research reports, comment on them, giving them good ideas to pursue further research. And then with my museum class, there's Ronald Kellogg, our president, sitting there. Our students will come in and say, these are the type of things we'd like to do to create an exhibit for the Mill Museum at the park, or in drawers that we could take out to the public to show them. And the friends give a lot of guidance, talking about how to improve, how to think about ways. So we're always working, in collaboration with the friends. And then here are students working on a model of the Civilian Conservation Corps camp that's out at the mill now, and students working on an exhibit drawer in one of our exhibit cases. And if you go out to the park, you will see cases like this, that actually, this is a senior in the engineering program whose dad happened to be a carpenter. And as an independent study program, he had done field work with me, lab work with me. He said, could I build a new exhibit case for you? So with advice from his dad, he built this case, and there he is standing very proudly by it. And here's two other students who've worked on one of the exhibit drawers. And here you can see there are drawers that pull out, giving you more artifacts to look at. And here's a team of people by the CCC exhibit. Very happy. These are the two people who did the model of the Civilian Conservation Corps camp. And then last, to wrap up, this is what, if you go out to the mill, you would see a lot of our exhibits. And again, a lot of this stuff happened because of this collaboration and support from the Friends of Robert Treman State Park.
Okay. So that presentation was, as you could see, given at Kendall of Ithaca. That was on January 24th. And it was a presentation sponsored by the Friends of Robert H. Treman State Park. If you want to see the whole show, which has been shown over these, this episode is the third part, and then the previous two episodes are part 1 and 2. You can go to my video blog, walkinthepark.tv, and you can find them all there. So, now, the Friends of Robert H. Treman State Park have, it's sometime in the mid-90s, I guess they started, about 20 years ago, and they are there to help the park with many different kinds of projects, including education and preservation. And one of their central items of interest is the old mill, which I think she mentioned. And yes, she definitely did, where the exhibits are. There's a museum in there and so forth. And the old mill is dates, I think it says up there on 1847 or something, but actually it was built in the late 1830s. And it's in needs some repair, and particularly a new roof and some windows and things like that, and also a fire suppression system. Now the Friends raised money for the installation of what they call a sniffer system that can smell smoke if there's fire in there, and the thing is all wood, so it would go up really quick. But there's still not installed a sprinkler system. That has to be a dry pipe system because the building is not heated. So the Friends of Robert H. Treman State Park are in the process of applying for some grant monies to study, do the initial part of further grant seeking for repairing the roof, and then eventually getting to the sprinkler system. That's a big process, but one of the things that granting organizations need is your membership list, and our membership is actually pretty small. So we have a lot of people on our Facebook page. If you go to our Facebook page, there's over 600 people there, but our membership is lower than that because people fall off the list and what have you. So it's only $10 a year. So if you go to our website, the first page there, you scroll down, you can find the membership form and you can print it out and send in. $10 a year. Not only does it help us out a little bit financially, but more than that, it builds up our membership base, and maybe we'll be more successful in a grant application to do things to help preserve this amazing old building. So we're going to look at a couple of other things in the park here. Just check my time here. The other day I actually went to a Friends of Robert H. Treman State Park board meeting, which is held in the lower park every month. And before the meeting I strolled up to the lower falls. Now that's the place where you go swimming. But this time of year, of course, there's no swimming. Swimming is just in the summer. So, but it was nice to go there. It was very pretty. They actually drained the pool. There's a dam there. Don't show it in these pictures, but the water is much lower here than it was during the summer, and so I could walk out and get this shot. But I also have a very short video, one of my glimpses of nature, it's called, that I will show you this water actually moving. So let's go take a look at this glimpse of nature. Yeah, I told you it was just a glimpse. So yeah, I have a little series of those I put up on the internet sort of for the people that have short attention spans, but you can see a picture moving. All right, so in the spirit of the historic theme of this show, let's take a look at this area, the Lower Falls, what it was like back in the Great Depression when there was a Civilian Conservation Corps camp in the Upper Park, when they were actually building this swimming area. So here they are. Let's see if I can get the caption on that. Can't quite see it. That says, working to create the swimming pool in Lower Enfield Glen. So the gorge is actually called Enfield Glen, and used to be called Enfield Glen or Enfield Falls State Park, depending on when you were looking. And here they are. This is looking across the pool, and there's a crew there working, constructing the diving platform, and then here they are actually constructing the area where you dive right next to the falls. So that would be what we get there, being built back in the 1930s by Civilian Conservation Corps. Now these swimming areas, or the gorge, everywhere in the gorge is susceptible to floods. So we're going to take a look at a picture here of what happens when you get really high water. This was a flood we had a couple of years ago. I think it was in 2013, in August, I believe, and August 9th or 10th. And this is the water has come down. Someone took this picture, but you can see all the debris and rocks and so forth that are actually in the diving area up above the pool. And this is when the water has come down. But the park has been subject to, all of our gorges are subject to periodic flash flooding. And Treman itself seems to have been particularly vulnerable to these for some reason. Storms seem to hang up on Connecticut Hill or something, which is the watershed for Enfield Creek, this being Enfield Creek, and can really result in some damage. The biggest flood in history was in 1935 that ripped out part of the foundation of the bathhouse and did a lot of other damage in the park. Almost took out the mill pond. Well, remember, it was cold. It's normally in the winter you get some ice in the falls. This is actually 2 winters ago, not last winter. I don't think I got in there to photograph the ice, at least photograph. I might have a video. But the falls, this is Lucifer Falls in the Upper Park, 115 feet high, and it's normally got a lot of ice on it this time of year, but I haven't gone up and taken a picture lately, but maybe it'll get like this further along in the month. I was that same walk when I went and looked at the lower falls there. I walked around in the Enfield Creek and waiting for the meeting, and this was just a nice shot along the water of Enfield Creek. And look at those grasses that were swept down by some recent high water. that almost look like hair or something. It's kind of cool. And then looking across the creek is the cabin area that was built back in the 30s as well by the CCC's Civilian Conservation Corps. And of course, it's quiet and dark there now. But come spring, that will fill up with people having their vacations there. And there are people that come back every year to the cabin area at Robert H. Freeman State Park, and it's just a stroll over to the swimming area. So that's a pretty delightful place to have your vacation, and it's near lots of other things, of course. So we're going to we got a couple of minutes left. We'll take a look at some other spots. Once again, this is Walk in the Park, walkinthepark.tv. We're going to pop over to the Rim Trail at Buttermilk Falls State Park. I live near there, and I go for a lot of walks in that park. And this is looking off the Rim Trail into the Gorge Trail, and you can see the steps down there in the Gorge Trail, which most of the time are covered with some very treacherous ice. This was earlier in the winter, so it's not so icy. But I'm sure it will get very icy, and it has been very icy since. Not a good idea. You think the gorges are like clear, they're, because the land is clear, but the gorges can be full of ice, and there have actually been some tragic deaths from people sliding off the ice into the roaring stream. So this is the top of Pinnacle Rock. Here's a Pinnacle Rock rising in the middle. It's about 40 feet high or so, they say. And it's been there a long time, separated by erosion from the main wall. Now, if we were down in the gorge in the summertime, you can look up, and here's the trail as it goes up between Pinnacle Rock and the cliff on the right, with the falls down below, just below it there. Very pretty spot, one of my favorite spots. And it's been a popular place for people to visit for even well back into the 19th century. This is an old stereograph. We talked a lot about stereographs last episode, and here is a section of that. You can see Pinnacle Rock and its falls. And here we're going to look at, on the back of all the stereographs that people could get and put in a viewer and get a stereo view of the scene, it says Monument Rock and the Cornell Cascade, Buttermilk Ravine. So they, some people call that the Cornell Cascade. I never heard it called that. And we call it Pinnacle Rock now, but it's been called Monument Rock, but also Steeple Rock. So it's had different names. Well, that's all we have time for today. So thank you for joining me, and I'll see you again soon. Here, I'll find a nice image to end with here. This is Owl Gorge in Buttermilk Falls State Park. Okay.